a way that anyone can differentiate themselves or stand out from the crowd. Because a lot of people who have those talents and gifts very naturally, when it gets further down the road in life and they haven't really had to truly work hard, based on what I've seen, it can sometimes be difficult for those individuals to turn that gear on. Yeah, what I was saying was that, when I first got out of school, and like the way that I grew up, in a family that was entrepreneurial. I grew up with a father that worked very, very hard. I'm not going to say that I worked super hard when I was in high school. I worked really, really hard at having fun, and I got really, really good at figuring out how to not do the stuff that I didn't want to do so that I could do the things that I wanted to do. So there was good lessons there. But when I got out of the University of Texas, I was operating from a place of what I had seen was, if you work really hard and if you do the work on the front end, like, it's going to work out for you. So that was how I approached everything. That was how I approached, the first few jobs that I had. That was how I approached, when I actually started getting skin in the game and having ownership in the businesses I was participating in. But there's a flip side to that, though, that, I think we're going to get in today. So I'm excited to talk about this more.
Yeah, I am too. First thing we got to say as we kick off another of Patriot On Purpose is, please, if you enjoy any of the content, like anything that we do on Instagram, on YouTube, go ahead, subscribe over there. Be sure to follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, you name it, and leave a review. You can leave a negative one. You can leave a positive one. The best thing is when you leave a review, it tells us we have a job we're doing and we're able to improve. So we ask that you do that.
Yeah, we want feedback.
We ask that you do that only if you feel led to. I mean, pretty easy. It takes about 2 seconds. You can do it while you're listening, and it means a lot to us, and it helps us do what we're doing right here. So today's...
Right, and you can find us at Patriot On Purpose if you were to search that on Instagram. Adam, what is your handle?
I believe it's ADAMLANTELME on Instagram.
And mine is at Nate M. Hopkins, Natem from Michael Hopkins, Nate M. Hopkins.
Yeah, and one of the more important things is, if you're listening to this before June 3rd of 2024, if you go to Patriot, oh man, I'm messing it up, vnsh.com/POP, you can get one of our products, which is the Vanish holster, the most comfortable holster on the planet, and you'll be entered to win an awesome $80,000 Rocky Ridge Silverado. So that's only about...
and this thing is dialed.
From the time that we're doing this, is about 5 weeks left in the contest, so go ahead and take advantage of this limited time offer. We will do another giveaway in the future, but at least you can get this holster now for $50 off and get entered to win. And I think that's actually a really good way to transition into what we were going to talk about today, which is hustle culture. So, we own several different companies. Between the two of us, we're partners in several different companies. We even have brands inside of those companies. And the only way that it seems logical to make this kind of stuff work when you're running brands that are generating millions of dollars is just to put your nose to the grindstone and work your face off. But counterintuitively, as we're going to talk about, there may be seasons for that kind of work, but hustle culture, by and large, is... I don't think you want to call it a myth. It's not a myth. People participate in it all day long, but it is a bad idea. At least I think it's a bad idea. If you want to marry hustle culture, expect that woman to ruin your life, or that man, depending on whatever gender you are. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's, it was talking about when we first kind of came on. I think when it comes down to it, there's a lot of smart and talented people in the world. And a way that anyone can differentiate themselves or stand out from the crowd. Because a lot of people who have those talents and gifts very naturally, when it gets further down the road in life and they haven't really had to truly work hard, based on what I've seen, it can sometimes be difficult for those individuals to turn that gear on. But on the other side of it, and some of this came from a conversation I was having with my daughter's boyfriend, who we were heading in the truck somewhere. He was helping out with something, and he was asking me, hey, like, how can I really separate myself from my peers? Like, so he's training to be an EMT and then a fireman, and the first thing I told him was like, one, like, always be early. Like, always be early. Be early. Show up the way you're supposed to show up. Be respectful of other people's time, and always be the first one to volunteer for work, even extra work. Like, and even if it's work that you're actually not going to get paid for, which is something that we talked about on a previous podcast, but being willing to go the extra mile early on. There's so many people out there. There's so many people with gifts and talents, but the one thing that will always win out is when someone's willing to outwork someone else. But there's a balance to that, as Adam was starting to talk about. So I don't know if you want to kind of jump in there, Adam, and talk about some of your thoughts there. But that's it'd be good for us to kind of I guess balance that.
I think the trap is that you feel like you have to put in extra work all the time in order to continue to progress. Because I think anytime you're starting something out, that extra work is going to do a couple of different things. One, it's going to set you apart, especially if you're working for somebody else. They're going to take notice of the fact that you are producing at a rate that other people aren't willing to. And especially if you're not as good, like you don't have the natural talent as somebody else, you may have to work hard just to equal the output that other person has, but that's going to be seen. And then, what we've discovered, I know you and I and a lot of other entrepreneurs, is that you feel like you can get stuck in this trap of having to work hard all the time just because it's what you've done. And there is a season for that. Like, getting a business off of the ground, you have to work really hard because most likely you have another job. And so you're putting in your 40 hours at that other job or your 30 hours, and then you're on the side working on your business. Like, when I was starting off doing my entrepreneurial efforts, I was waiting tables, and I would wait tables, and then I'd get done at like 11 in the evening, and I would go to a coffee shop across the street, work till 2 in the morning. And at that time, I wasn't even working for money. I was working just to get the reps in to be able to do what I was doing, which for a long time was copywriting. I rarely do that anymore. But I was like, if I don't do this now, I'm never going to be able to get it done. Like, I could always find an excuse not to do it. So that's how I ended up working till 2 in the morning, waking up at 7 or 8, and then going off to my jobs to be able to pay for my daily living expenses. And then I noticed, like, once the copywriting career took off and I was freelancing, I still had to work really hard because I had to find a lot of clients. I had to put in that work in order to keep the hopper full, keep the bank account full. And then after a few years, I discovered, like, wait, I'm making enough money to where I don't have to work this hard any longer. And so I started to eye my options. I was like, what am I really trying to do here? Am I trying to work to live, or am I trying to live to work? And I did not want to live to work. And, that's one of the core values that we have in our company, is that we have not set our company up for people to live to work. And I think that that's something that you see in a lot of companies. It's expected. Like, that's the culture that has been bred. And this is not just Silicon Valley either. It's people all across the world. Like, it doesn't really matter. All across any kind of industry. And, like, the thing about it is people just get trapped up in what they think life should be like, and then they just keep working in the attempt to hit that goal, and sometimes they eclipse it, and they never are able to dial back.
Well, it's you get into patterns, and you create habits, and those things, slowly become your identity. And I can definitely speak to, so I have something I want to share about, like, kind of like my own experiences that might be helpful to share, but I want to ask you before I do that, like, was that something that just was naturally there for you, or was there someone that was a part of, like, that kind of season in your life that helped you see that, or just, what enabled you to find that balance and, and boundaries?
I think nobody else was encouraging me. I mean, my dad kind of got me on the path of trying to become a copywriter, but I was just so dissatisfied with the station that I held in life that I knew that the only thing that was going to change it was outworking not anybody else, because I wasn't competing against anybody else. It was outworking my lazy self, because I was super lazy. All of my 20s, I was just I partied. I snowboarded a ton. I wanted to
Just wanted to snowboard.
Yeah, just wanted to snowboard, and I did a lot of drugs. And it was in my 20s that I realized, like, hey, this is not good. And it took me 5 or 6 years to correct myself. And, that's when I started to learn, okay, I have to work a little bit harder than I was before. And it was incremental in terms of, like, the kind of output that I was able to produce. And then I think when I started to see the light, the end of the tunnel, so to speak, that I realized, oh, man, if I can just push down on this pedal and start to give it some gas, I could probably make it to the end of this tunnel and then break through and have some kind of success, or I could realize the dreams that I had. But I was just unsatisfied. I did not want to settle for the mediocre life that was ahead of me if I decided to continue on the way that I was. And I remember there was this video a long time ago, and it was like, you will succeed when you want it as bad as you can breathe. And like, there was something to that effect. This guy's like running in the ocean. Yeah. So you remember that, and I was just like, I want it more than anything. And I think a lot of people feel like that. And again, it speaks to the trap that you can fall into, or the disillusionment.
Yeah. I think for me, again, like I had, my mom's parents, owned their own real estate business. They had a Zenith and Quasar franchise, which, I don't know if that dates me. It might.
Yeah.
But,
I was
not
like,
as
Zenith.
big of a deal as they used to be.
TV, that's right.
Yeah. Yeah. It takes a minute. Like, but they had their own, they had their own franchise for those, and they sold TVs. And my grandfather also had his own TV repair, appliance repair business, in addition to being real estate, and in addition to also being a manager at the Alcoa plant. So he would go work at Alcoa all day and then come home, and he would immediately go into the shop and start repairing things. And all the while during the day, my grandmother was managing the books, managing and selling, TVs and, home entertainment electronics out of the showroom, and managing, the real estate stuff and all the tenants they had, like in the apartment complex they owned. So that's what I grew up watching. Also grew up watching my dad, who, he made the sacrifice to he really wanted to coach, and be there for my brothers and I, which actually led to him not taking, he ended up stepping out of a management role that he was in a pharmaceutical company, so that he could do that. And then the other thing that he did, he always loves telling me this story, but like, I think I came downstairs once to get water in the middle of the night, and he was in his office, working at, like, it was probably 1:30, 2 in the morning. And he always goes, I remember you standing behind me, and he's like, I could hear you eating a bowl of cereal, and you just like, you're just kind of standing there next to me. So Dad, when I'm an adult, I'm not going to do what you do, because I don't want to work that hard. and now he comes back and he goes, I don't even understand why you've decided, or how things change, and you've worked to the level that you have. And that's kind of what I'm going to, is when I got out of school, I ended up, going into sales, and then ended up in this boutique, consulting firm. And while I was at University of Texas, I roomed with a guy. We actually started selling digital products on the internet. And you would have thought that I'd have really caught that bug and gotten excited about it. But I was playing. I was a pilot at the time, and I was training to do that. So I thought I was going to, go into that profession, which ended up not happening. And I went into sales, and I got into that world. I got into the management consulting world, and it was so brutal. Like, and there were some specific things that I think made that experience, kind of unique and heightened, but it was obscene. And it was so miserable, and such a divergence from what I really wanted to do and what I was naturally wired to do, that I was willing to do anything to get out of it. So like, I would literally be on the road, 4 to 5 days away from home, in the my latter 20s, just married, baby on the way at that point. And actually we did have our first child while I was still working inside of that firm, but I was gone 4 to 5 days a week. And, I would get home, and I would jump in and help my wife out with our daughter. And the second that they all got situated and my wife was going to bed, and our daughter was also colicky at that stage. So I would literally come home from, like, being on the East Coast or or wherever I was, and I would immediately make my wife a bath, get her a bottle of wine and be like, all right, you need to go relax. Like, you've been listening to a screaming child all week. I got this. And I would literally go into the room where our child was, our daughter, and I would, when she was crying and upset from being called, like, I would do that. But then as soon as she was fine, like, I would literally work until 3, 4, 5 in the morning. I don't sometimes wouldn't even know when I fell asleep. I would just wake up like asleep on my laptop or by it. And like, that was that. And I did that for months and months and months, even years. And, that did pay off to where I was able to leave, the corporate world and get into the more entrepreneurial space, which was great. But I literally went from that to, and that particular, or that those companies that I got to be a part of starting, it never really slowed down. Like, there wasn't really anybody in the business that was mature enough, in business experience where they really knew how to scale companies. So we were just doing it by brute force. We hired people, but like, it just was like people just working and doing working at obscene levels to make the business work. And, like, these heroic efforts, which works, you can get away with that in your 20s and even well into your 30s if you take care of yourself. But it literally went from like that to then I ended up exiting out of that and going into another startup. That startup took off and went crazy. I hardly took any vacations. I don't think I even took an actual real vacation during the first one. That was 3 or 4 years. And the second one, I definitely didn't take any. I got into the next one, didn't take any vacation. If I did take vacations, I worked the whole vacation.
Yeah, you just changed
I did
locations.
that for probably a solid decade.
Right.
Yeah, it's just the same grind, just like in a cooler location, which can help. But if you're really trying to, maintain a healthy marriage, and love your kids well, it becomes a massive challenge. And it becomes your identity. And that's what happened to me. Like, fortunately, I really did. I still prioritized family. So there wasn't too much carnage that was created there. But it came at a cost. Like, we're like in my, I'm 46 now. So when I was 40, 2020 was when I ended up getting just a lot of things just came to a head. And like, I ended up getting really, really sick. And it took 2 years of very, very focused effort, a lot of specialists, a lot of the right people showing up at the right time, which, I definitely believe I know God had a hand in those people showing up at the times they did, because I literally would get one thing corrected and then something new, or I'd be at the end of where I had answers and like, all right, now I'm back to where I don't know what to do. I'm still not functioning well, but it was like, I just beat myself down so hard that, if those people hadn't shown up when they did, like, who knows how that would have played out. But that was all because I bought into, not like, and I don't think there's anything wrong with buying into the hustle culture. I think, absolutely hustle, but like, have like, there's things that you got to do to make sure that you're taking care of yourself and you're taking care of your family. Because at the end of the day, if you get to the end of all of that, and that was the thing that I always told myself, because there was a couple times where my wife had, those come to Jesus conversations with me where she's like, hey, like, I know you want this thing to succeed, and, I want it to also, but like, you're going down a path that, like, if you keep going, I don't know if I'm going to be able to keep following you. And that was a blessing to me, because if I didn't have my wife and my kids at the end of that, or when I get to the ascent of that particular mountain, then it was for naught, because that was the whole reason why I got into it.
Yeah, I think this is really what needs to be focused on when we talk about hustle culture. There is a good reason to grind. There's a book on grit that says, like, if you show this level of tenacity and perseverance, you can make all kinds of things happen. You can move mountains. You can do things that nobody ever thought that you could. But why? And I think you can tell me about your own experience, but like, for me, when I was really trying to make something happen, I had a vision of financial success, solving a lot of problems for myself. Like, before I was married, I was doing it so that I could create a version of myself that could, it wasn't just about supporting a family and a wife. It was like, actually, I'm looking to attract a woman. I was like, 6 figures, women like 6 figures. Let's go ahead and attract a woman, work really hard, get that. Then you do that, you hit that number, and you realize 6 figures isn't that much money. It's definitely not that much money under Biden's economy. So we know not to be voting for him. Vote for a patriot. That's all I got to say. I'm not going to say who to vote for. Just vote for a patriot. But the thing about it is it becomes a moving target. It's especially true for people who are in business and they're like, oh man, like every single quarter you set revenue targets. Every single year you set revenue targets. And so those targets are always getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And you realize, if I work harder, then we can get there. Because like every time I work hard, we are able to achieve, maybe we come close or maybe we surpass our revenue targets. And then you're like, oh, this is kind of addicting. But failing to ask the question of like, why am I doing this? Why am I trying to make all this money? So I can fill a garage with more stuff so I can have a ton of things that are in my house that I don't even touch. And that's the trap or the danger of hustle culture that I see and that like I firmly push against, and which is why like we're hiring people. Like right now, you know this, but we're trying to bring a guy into our company as a creative director, and he works mad hours. And I am doing this for 2 reasons. I want to bring him in for 2 reasons. One, nobody should have to work that hard to make a life for themselves. And 2, we are creating a business to be able to take pressure off of people so they can enjoy the things that are important to them. He has kids. He has 2. And his kids don't know anything but dad works. And so I'm like, we may not be able to pay you the same thing that you're making at 100 hours a week or 80 hours a week, but we can pay you enough, more than enough, to make it so that you're happy and that you're home and present with your family. And so I think if you get trapped or if you get intoxicated with hustle culture because like it's bringing a lot of material success to you, you need to ask the question like, is this actually bringing fulfillment and contentment in my life? And I can guarantee you, if the only reason you hustle hard is to make more, to buy more, then you are wrong. It is not bringing additional happiness, satisfaction, comfort, anything. That is your God. And that is a poor God because it can't do anything. It does not serve you. It enslaves you. And so this is where I'm like, I fully reject hustle culture as a way of living. I fully embrace hustling for a short period of time. Like you well know, I just worked the first 70-hour work week I've done in years a couple of weeks ago. And it was worth it. And now I'm not back. I'm back to not working 70 hours a week. So,
well, it's you, but you went into it with a plan. You're like, all right, there's a clear beginning and end to this particular sprint. Like, I'm not going to, because again, it's like, I think, and I don't know if it's a function of the way culture is now, or if, like the way we relate to work as Americans, which I guess depending on what circles you're in, like that could be, mean you don't have any work ethic, or you have an absolute obscene level of work ethic. It's kind of, it varies. But yeah, I think, what was the last thing you said?
Just again? How, like, if you're exercising your ability to hustle hard for achieving new levels of material success, feeding yourself with more and more and more, thinking that that's going to give you contentment, you're not actually, you're enslaved. You're enslaved to a poor God.
Yeah. No. Well, again, you went into it knowing, so like there was, you kind of had a clear beginning and end. So you're like, all right, here's what needs to be accomplished. I'm going into a level of work mode that I'm not normally in, but I'm going to do it here, and here's where it stops, and then, reassess and see how things play out.
And I had the muscle memory for it because I remember working 70, 80-hour weeks for long periods of time. So it wasn't all that hard to do. I wasn't thrilled about it because the biggest reason I wasn't thrilled about it is because I have kids and a wife that I want to pay attention to. If I was single, oh man, that's what I would probably be doing because I had the mindset of hustle hard, build this thing, attract the person that you want into your life. And that's exactly what happened. So all of a sudden, like for the first few years of our marriage, I was still hustling. I'm like, I have to build something for us. And then once I did, I was like, okay, I can ease off of this gas pedal that I've had floored for a number of years now. And I was able to do that. And sure, I've missed out on making a lot more money than I could have, but I have relationships that I enjoy. So all worth it. Don't care one bit that I didn't make all that extra money.
I think a lot of people can get lost and distracted by the stuff that they perceive to be freedom. So like cars and like, you know, the material possessions like you're talking about, versus looking at money as, you know, it's like gasoline for a car. Like and it depends on where you're trying to drive the car. So, I mean, so if like your biggest aspiration in life is to, you know, to buy a Lamborghini,
To
then
flex hard.
and that's something that like really brings you a lot of joy. I mean, there's some people that are just straight up car
That
people.
makes
Like
sense.
they, you know, from the time that they were a little kid, like, you know, they're like, oh my gosh, I saw that Lamborghini Countach on Cannonball Run, and like all I've wanted ever since I saw that is to have that car. And like that's just a massive aspiration for them. That's like one thing, you know, and it's, you know, and but it's another to get into this mode of like keeping with the Joneses and acquiring all this stuff, you know, and I don't know if this is the exact quote, but like people, you know, talking about, yeah, you buy all this stuff and then the stuff ends up owning you. And there's this like this residual weight that you keep piling on, as opposed to, you know, and I got clear on this, you know, probably a few years ago, where like it just dawned on me one day, and it was actually, I remember exactly when it was. I was walking across from one of the buildings on our property where I'd been working all night, and I was walking to the main house, and I was, you know, and it was one of the projects that I had that was starting to wind down, and I was like, I have paid everybody else like in this project a lot of money. I have paid myself the least amount, which sometimes that's appropriate. You know, like, and that's, you know, again, I was the part of the journey I selected, so I'm not complaining about it, but it was like, I was sitting there doing the calculus on how much time and energy that I had applied to that, what I had been taking away from my wife and my kids for a long time. And then additionally, like, you know, the amount of, in your 40s, I think you become a little bit, depending on where you're at and how, the decisions you've made, you can either be becoming a slightly more aware of like how much energy you have, and, you know, like, and what a valuable, precious resource that is. And then there's, you know, me, where I was becoming abundantly aware of like how much energy I had given. And, you know, if you're looking at like an electrical circuit, like it works as long as like that energy keeps coming back. But if it stops somewhere, it's just energy that's gone out into the ether. And so you don't get recharged or re-energized when you're just putting energy out there and you're not getting anything back. And that was when I started doing the calculus on, okay, when I'm exerting my effort to generate income and money, I need to be finding ways to also get that money to turn into more money, to where the money is working and I'm not working, because my energy expenditure, what I have to give, you know, even though if you'd have talked to me in my late 20s, I would have told you it was infinite. It's not. There's only so much you have to give. Like, it's just the universe is going to get what it wants to get. And, you know, there's rules, you know, and you can cheat them for a little bit of time, but you can't cheat them permanently. So it's, again, going back to, it's like, you know, having clear beginning and end when you are going into like one of those modes, and knowing what you're in it for, and you know, and having a strategy. And to your point, that purpose, the why, like, why are you doing it? Because that was something else that for me, man, I just was like, I just wanted to do it because I had a number of people who told me I couldn't. So it was like, I was hell bent to like prove those people wrong. Which
that's bad.
I think
that's pride.
Yeah, no, it fueled me. In some situations, it served me well, but ultimately in the long term, that was not the right place to do it from.
And I'm only picking on you because, like, everybody's like that. I don't care who you are. Like, you're always wanting to prove the naysayers wrong. You always want to elevate yourself. Like, it's human nature. It's going to play into it. I think the important part is the level set, and at least acknowledge that what you're doing has its genesis in something that is either based around pride, or it has something to do with desire that is not a healthy desire. I mean, this is just human nature, fundamental human nature, sinful people, whether you choose to accept sin or not. Like, this is how I view it. And so this is the way that we move through life, and every single day Like, you have to wrestle with that. Like, we show up, I show up.
Yeah, we're
Yeah,
flawed.
I show up. I'm like, I'm gonna kick ass today, and when I do that, I am served. And to be honest, like, I don't think about other people all day long and like how this hard work is going to benefit them. Like, I try at least to be cognizant and aware of it, but I know everybody in the company is doing the exact same thing. It's just everybody on the planet does the exact same thing. So I think if you can at least like take time throughout the day to reorient yourself or reframe the conversation in your mind around hustling and the end result, and you can make it less. It's not even that it's going to be less about you. You're still going to have you as the primary driver, because you are you. You talk to you all day. You're only focused on yourself. I mean, this is just human nature again, but reframing it at least like takes like the hustle element, if this is the stage of life that you're in, and says, oh, okay, like I can actually apply this for good, for myself and for others. For one, like you were talking about earlier, and I was kind of curious about this. You had mentioned like you were just sending it in your late 20s, and how, like, I can't remember exactly what you said, but something to the effect of like, if you take care of yourself, it's sustainable. I was like, I don't even know how you take care of yourself working 100 hours a week. You don't.
Yeah, and that's where, I was. So here's where it's like yes and no. It's possible and it's not possible. So one of the ways that I dealt with stress was I worked out at obscene levels. So, and that's how I've always dealt with stress in my life, especially probably ever since when I was a teenager, like it was adrenaline. Like, so my therapy was football, it was BMX racing, it was martial arts and MMA. It was jumping off of things that were high. When it was college, I dealt with stress like by being a pilot, because that was adrenaline. I still did Muay Thai boxing and jiu-jitsu, and that was part of it, and still looked for ways to get adrenaline, because that centered me. And then, when I got into the professional world, again, it's like I picked businesses that were I won't say higher risk, but like they were in the sense of like the amount of time and energy I was putting in. And then the model, those particular business models also provided adrenaline rushes, just because there was a big build up and a launch, and so there was a lot. It was very high stakes. But up into my late 30s, the way that I coped was just absolutely abusing my body, like in the gym. Like that was like how I did it, and I didn't sleep much, but because I was in such good condition, I think I got away with it for longer. But like it's like driving on, it'd be like driving out on this open. Let's say we're driving out in the salt flats at night, and it's pitch black, and but there's a wall out there somewhere. There's somewhere there isn't flat ground, and I'm just going as hard as I can go. And eventually, in the back of my mind, I was like, I'm probably going to hit a wall at some point. I don't know where. And I just hope that I get the big win before I get there. And for me, I didn't get the big win. I got big wins, but not the big win that would have enabled me to do what a lot of guys do after they've sold a big company, and they go and they start doing all the peptide therapies, and they get, experts, and they're doing all these things to repair their bodies, which I actually have ended up doing that. I just didn't do it, after a massive transaction. I had to do it before then. But, I hit that wall, and I abused my body to the point to where it just said no more. Like my body didn't allow me to drink alcohol anymore. Like anytime I did, it was like my body just got massively inflamed and felt like garbage. I mean, anything that I did, like I couldn't, if I tried to work out, it just hurt. Just my body no longer felt good. So anyway, so like, I was able to, but again, that's where I go into, like, you can, in some ways, it's like I was kind of cheating in a way, but eventually, like, again, the human body is designed to operate the way that it does. And I was abusing that for too long. And eventually, even though I was in good shape, my body was like, I was ignoring too many other things, the sleep and, like I had been prescribed Adderall and Vyvanse, which I've talked about before. And like that was masking some of the problems that were there, because of the way that it affects the brain and, artificially gives you energy and focus and things like that.
Really, when you look at it from, it's not an existential lens, but life, it's a marathon. and we always view it in this
Oh, yeah.
condensed time frame of this sprint. And so, again, there's times for sprinting, but you can't sprint forever because that's when you're just gonna trip and just right before the finish line too. So I think that's a mentality that needs to, for a lot of people, needs to shift. They need to understand that this is a marathon. You're not building anything of substance if all you're doing is sprinting, because you're in a race thinking it's only 200 meters long, and guess what? It's 26 miles long. So you're gonna just crash and burn before that. And of course, like, I think that the thing about a marathon too is, like, you may be able to enjoy it a little bit more. I mean, screw it, running sucks, so maybe there's a different analogy. But when you're sprinting, I mean, you're just dying. And when you're running a marathon, like, yeah, it's hard, but you're not dying. You're not feeling like death every single step. So I don't think it's worth it for I don't think it's worth it for anybody who is like tempting fate or not tempting fate, but like tempting themselves with like, hey, I could just grind my face off and make this work. Like, you're not going to enjoy it. And then you're, like you said, you're going to have to repair yourself. And that's a crazy thing to do, is like just blast your way through your 20s, 30s, and 40s. And then on the other side, like, just try and build yourself back together again, when if you had just taken the time to think through the consequences of like this extreme driven brutality of work, that you could actually just dial it back and extend your life, extend the quality of your life, and then just get the payout 10, 15 years later than otherwise.
Well, and lots of times too, man, like there's something to be said too for, there's a rhythm that exists. And, there are definitely, when I look back over, my journey, there's a couple times where like I can clearly look at the way things unfolded, and it was like, you know what, if I had actually slowed down a little bit in those moments and not forced things so much, it actually might have played out differently. Like some of the things where I didn't get wins, there's one or two times I'm like, I think I actually would have won really big there if I wouldn't have been charging so hard, because there would have been more time for other things to materialize. That could have been like, the right people coming into the situation. It could have been, just me being more objective. Like we're like, because you can be in a situation where you're pushing and you're working, you're forcing things so much that like it prevents you from actually being able to see other things around you. Cause like you're bearing down so hard. So, there's, to your point, like just a more sustainable pace, I think it just makes sense on every level. Like now, granted, there are times where like, maybe there are some other decisions that we make, or, you've made, I've made, anybody makes, that like has ended up creating a situation where like your only option is to hustle your face off. And that's what you have to do. Like, I mean, there's real world situations, where, I go back to, I've had to run it back from zero twice, and doing that with the wife and, kids versus, and I never actually had that challenge when I was single. I got married. I met my wife when she was 18 and I was 20, and we got married by the time I was 25 and she was 23. And, we had a kid 2 years later. So like when I actually went into the entrepreneurial existence, like I already had a family. So like anytime stuff's bottomed out, it was like, one time when we literally legit had to sell my wife's dream house. Like that sucks. And I can promise you, I was hustling my face off, and was able to, God willing, things were, came back. But again, it came at a price later, because I never recognized, I need to chill out for a minute. Like I need to actually, have a season of rest and recovery. It doesn't mean you stop working, because then you create the opposite thing. Like you can, God, we are so programmable as humans. Like when I look at, so when I did hit that wall, I didn't choose to overreact and go into such a hardcore season of rest and recovery. I forced myself into it where that was the only option. But when I came out of it, it was like I had to like I had gotten to the point of where, you know, I had developed some habits that weren't, that did not support, you know, being an entrepreneur. Like, and I was like, I almost had to reprogram myself again. Cause it's like, you can create lots of good habits, and then you can have something that happens where those habits are no longer, hardwired in the same way. So it's like, that's why, again, to your point earlier, it's finding that balance. Cause again, if you get forced into a situation where, you know, you do have to go into these hard reset modes, it's like sometimes you lose a lot of the progress that you made previous, and you are really like starting all over again, which is definitely a rough place to be.
I know we're coming at this from the angle of business, which is where hustle culture typically lives, but I wanted to say two things. One, exercising so that you have that muscle memory to be able to just push when you need to. I think there's a time and a place, especially anytime that you're getting something off of the ground, where you just have to be committed to working harder than anybody else. Like, if you're not willing to do that, then this whole conversation wasn't for you in the first place. But if you're not willing to do that, you're not going to realize dreams, I don't believe, right? Like, you have to be able to bring them to reality.
Very rarely do you get punched in the face metaphorically when things are going really, really well and you have tons of energy and you have the ability to react really well. It's usually going to happen when you're already like you're already down, like you're already exhausted, you're already beat up. And then it's like, is this the one that's going to put you on the mat? Like, and I think you'll appreciate this. I picked up one of my daughters from school earlier this week. She had just had what in Texas we call the STAR test, which is like one of those tests that they use to determine, like, you know, how things are going with the kids in school, and schools get funding, you know, for it and things like that. But I mean, she had done this test. She was absolutely spent. Like, she was just done. And, you know, the workout, we were going to go do CrossFit afterwards, and I showed her what the workout was, and dude, she literally teared up. And I mean, and inside I was like, there's part of me that didn't want to do the workout either, because it involved like a whole lot of running stacked with some other, you know, exercises. I was like, that's going to suck, you know, now, but I'm the adult in the room, you know, like so like I sat there and I looked at it and I go, you're probably gonna be mad at me. And I was like, I kind of don't want to do the workout either, but we're going to go do it. And the reason why we're going to do it is because you're going to have a moment next week or next month, or it's going to happen when I'm no longer getting to hang out with you like this. And you're out there doing your thing, and you're going to have an opportunity to do something, you know, spectacular. And it might come at the moment when like you are absolutely exhausted and you are just not in the mental space to do it. Or it could just be, you know, you're just having a rough time. There's something that you have to do. And that experience can suck so much worse. But if you are ready to rise to that occasion because you've trained yourself by doing hard things, like, do the hard stuff now, so later on the hard stuff isn't
That's
hard
what I was
anymore.
going to...
Like, it doesn't make it not hard, but it's like...
Yeah. That's what I was
go
going to
ahead.
say. It's like, we've been talking business specifically, but there are so many times where that same application, that same mentality of doing hard things to prepare for other hard things are going to be applicable to things that matter more than work, like your relationship. If your relationship is on the rocks, like if you've hit Skid Row over there, man, what a beautiful thing to hustle to fix.
Absolutely.
Like,
or being, you know, a stay-at-home parent, whether it's a mom or a dad, like
colicky
that's,
kids.
I mean, you love those kids, but that's work. That is
colicky
work.
kids are the absolute worst people to be around. If you have not exercised that hustle muscle, oh, there we go. There's a new T-shirt, the hustle muscle.
Hustle muscle, baby.
Actually, yeah, let's do that shirt. But I think that's where, again, like, I remember so many times with our second, I was just like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. And my wife has felt the same way. Like, we just wanted to quit. And that's the thing, is people do quit. I don't know if you saw this story. This story is absolutely bananas. And everybody who hears this is just going to be incensed and irate. Just a few weeks ago, left her toddler in a crib, threw a bunch of food and water in there, and went into a cruise for 10 days. I think you know what happened. That's what people do if they don't know how to. Yeah, wow. I was just like, I read that story and almost threw up. But like, that's the thing, is like, people do this all the time. They quit everywhere. And I am not casting aspersions on anybody who has separated or whatever. But if you're at a place where you're like, maybe you're in a relationship that feels like it's falling apart, maybe your kids are too difficult to deal with, like whatever. Like if you have been able to put in hard work harder than anybody in other things, then that means that you could possibly salvage something that is, again, so much more valuable than the money you could make from having learned how to hustle. And I think that my marriage has benefited from working really hard because, dude, I know you felt this before. There are so many days where, like, I somehow work 8 hours and I was convinced I was just going to work 1 hour that day. Just like, you're like, I could quit at any time. I work from home. Nobody's going to know. But yet, like, I have just continued to work and work and work and work. And it's, again, like, that's an 8-hour day. I'm not putting any more than that, but I could have quit early on. And it's only because I was able to do that for a long time where I was just grinding that I'm able to string these other kinds of success along. But, like, if I hadn't made that choice whenever I did in my 20s to work my face off, I know we've used that term a lot, in complete obscurity, by myself, nobody knowing, me not getting paid a dime, I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing right now. And I was the king of quitting for a long time. And I would like to think now that if I were to enroll in Bud's training, I might actually make it a whole day as opposed to 1 hour like my 20-year-old self would have. Just from, like, the mentality that I've adopted. And that would be, like, if I could make it 24 hours in Bud's training, I would consider myself a champion. Because I can't swim.
Yeah, man. That's that whole the whole thing they've designed over there is just an absolute test of human.
A grinder, as they call it.
Yeah, just someone who's willing to just not give up, and that's I don't know if this is the best thing to pivot to, but it just is kind of what's there for me. Someone's asking me, like, what was the like, if there, and I don't know if this, I can't remember exactly what the question was asked, but basically it's just like, hey, if there was, like, what's one of the secrets to succeeding? And I've heard people say, like, oh, never quit, things like that, because there actually are times when you should quit. Like, there's times when something's just not going to work out for whatever reason. But what I responded to with them in that moment was, like, don't ever get out of the game. Like, never get out of the game. Even, like, when you're resting, like, you're still not fully out of the game. Like, it's like you stay on the field. Like, the only way you lose is if you actually stop playing. Like, the second you stop, that's when the wheels come off.
Yeah, there's a quote that I have on my desk. 90% of success is showing up every day and doing the obvious things and never considering yourself smarter than you really are. So it's just showing up.
Yeah, amen to that.
And
no, dude, I love being.
Oh, I was gonna say, like you said, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't quit some things, but just don't get out of the game. Like you may be on a, like, just to use a sports analogy, you may be on a terrible team. Go ahead and get off of that team. Like, there's no need to stick on with a bunch of losers if you have an opportunity to go win somewhere else. But just stay in the game.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, team. That's a big deal. It's like, and that's. Again, it's like one of those things that, as time goes on, you start learning who are the right players to be around, like who makes you better, who do you make better, because both of those things are really important aspects of that equation. Yeah, man, that was something I wish I would have. The thing, like, and it's one of the reasons why, like, I chose, and grateful that I was given the opportunity to choose to partner with you guys, but. A big part of the reason why I did was because of some of the other partnerships and business relationships I've had over the years where, I just didn't assess things properly, and I'm one of those people that, like, I have, like, this loyalty thing in me to where once I start on a mission, like, I like, to me, quitting is, like, it's just never an option. And, like, I have played that out to the point of where, like I said, where my wife has even at some point just been like, when's enough going to be enough? Like, we're not a stage where you have to choose between that and, me and the kids. And it's like, okay, I've made some mistakes if that's the conversation we're having. Especially with my wife. She's she has put up with a lot over the last 20 years of me being on this entrepreneurial journey. So when she does, and that's only happened a couple times, but when she did it, that's why I listened, because I was like, okay, that's, you don't say those things.
Yeah.
So we are now in a season of reassessment. So man, this is good stuff. You know, I mean, we're in a time where there's so many things happening culturally. There's so many things happening economically, and the need for people being able to provide for themselves and their families, like that never goes away. You know, and with some of the economic stuff going on right now, you know, there probably are a lot of people who are doing a lot of extra things to continue to build that legacy that they've been building. And this isn't, you know, it's a tough thing to weigh out. You know, it's tough to be able to decipher, you know, between when it's time to really go hard, when it's time to, you know, because there's, I don't know, and I don't really believe in balance. You know, like everyone's talking about, oh, like, you know, always you got to have this work-life balance. It's like, I mean, I think you try and find ways of making it work, but I don't know, like I've never felt like I was a balanced individual at any point in my life. And so it's just, you know, it's trying to make the decisions that, you know, support keeping the first things first.
Yeah, that's like, I think that's probably something that we should touch on. Like when we're saying hustle in the sense of building something as it relates to business, that's a good thing. Shouldn't be all the time or your everything, but you should apply this.
Well, and if you're an adult, you're probably spending 80% of your time like working.
Yeah, your time
like
away.
You're either outside of home working, or you're working on something as it relates to taking care of the business of home. But you're working.
But you should hustle everywhere else. Like in the sense that you need to rest and relax. Do that with the same kind of enthusiasm and the same kind of action that you would in work. Do that with your relationships. Do that with your health. Do that. And again, like this is very prescriptive and nobody's going to do it right. But like that's how you have to. You can't be lackadaisical about any of the things that make up your life. So your life is balanced. There are a number of things and they're not equally balanced, but you have to at least apply the balance of force on the things that matter. And work just happens to be 40 hours a week for most people. So that's where you're going to spend most of your time pushing. But, you know, coming out of the office, it could be pretty hard to be like, all right, I'm going to go hustle with the kids and like give them everything, but they just, so you should be prepared to do that. Yeah, I don't think that like balance means that like, okay, now it's time to like outside of work after I've hustled, like I can just kind of let everything fall through the cracks. No, you have to be willing to apply that same muscle everywhere else, that hustle muscle.
It's just intentionality. I mean, it's, you know, the internet's 24 hours. So if someone's trying to, you know, if their job is online or the business that they're trying to build is online, like it never shuts off. I mean, it's a 24-hour, you know, nonstop, you know, beast that, you know, if you want to give it your time, it'll take it. Like it's there to take it at any point. I mean, we've got these, you know, these phones that we walk around with all the time. So it's like, we could be at our kids thing. We could be at church. We could be wherever we are. And it's, you know, it can become very challenging to not allow those things to interrupt when you're taking, you know, when you're applying focus and energy and effort into another category, you know, like your kids or your spouse. I mean, man, I'll be at restaurants and like sometimes we're really good about not being on our phones. And there's other times, you know, and I'll look around, I'll see an entire table, both adults and like both kids all on their devices. And I'm like, oh man, all right, I don't want to do that. Like, I can't do that. All right, guys, let's put the phones down. Or like, you know, the other night went into the there was two different nights this week that I'll talk about. There was one night where I walked out of my office, which is here at the same place where, you know, it's my office is on the same property as my house. And I'm walking out and I'm like, all right, when I go in tonight, I'm going to be a force for us connecting as a family. And I was like, when I go in, I'm going to playfully and energetically demand that everyone shuts their shit off. And excuse my language, but shuts all their stuff off. I didn't say that, but like, everyone shut everything off, turn the TV off. Like, we're going to do dinner. We're going to talk. Like, I want to catch up. Like, let's like do this thing. And it went amazing. And even my eldest child, who gets overwhelmed or overstimulated really easy with a lot of noise and chaos, like even she was like fully engaged and happy and being, just fully present, and it was a wonderful evening. And then the next night I was a little more tired coming out of my day, and I had the desire to do that, but I walked in the house and they were watching a show that I wanted to watch. And so I sat down and started watching it. And then I'm like, all right, I'll help up make dinner a little bit. And so the show is going on while we're doing dinner. And at some point I'll talk a lot more about, being a special needs dad. I have a special needs child who is really, really good at being extremely loud. She's super charismatic, but also the captain of like, chaos and crazy at times. And it doesn't mix well when you're trying to, bring a child, one of my other daughters who gets overstimulated easily, and all that swirling, and we're trying to eat dinner, the TV's on, and one thing happened where the dog knocked some stuff over, and then that was it. And my eldest child like ejected. She's like, I can't, this is too much. Like, I gotta go. And I sat there and I was like, wow, bro, like you totally could have made this a different situation, and you didn't. Like, and again, this is just kind of driving the point home on like just the things that compete and can factor into, for me, I wanted to create a quality, peaceful situation, like at the end of the day. And, I didn't have the level of intentionality. Like even with being tired, I could have done it. I made a decision that did not translate to, what I was envisioning for our family that night, or what I'd like to see, on a daily basis. So it's tough. It's easy to slip.
Yeah, and I think that just goes to the point that I had made earlier, where nobody's going to do this perfectly. You don't do it perfectly. I don't do it perfectly. I think just having the awareness to understand that, like, how do I even say this? But working hard, intentional in everything you do, it just produces a better result. So not getting lost in working yourself to death for a potential payoff or payout, and realizing that you can enjoy the work when you're doing it. You can enjoy the people that you're with while you're working really hard. Like, there's so many things about life and about applying yourself and thinking through the reasonings why. And I don't think people ask why often enough. Like, why am I doing this? Like, even today when I was talking to the new guy that we want to bring on, I was like, we need to find your why. Like, why are we bringing you in here? I know, but like, what is it that you want to accomplish here? And so he would write something out, and it's like, okay, why? And he had said something to the effect of, oh, I just want to produce cool things. Why? Well, because I want to make people happy. Why? Well, because I think that happy people make a better world. Why does that matter, right? So, like, you can always just keep digging down. I think probably about 5 or 6, and after that, you're probably just scraping rock. But if you're caught up in the idea of like, I really need to hurl myself full force into this, why? Why do you need a side hustle? Why do you want to start a business? Why do you want this, that, or the other? When it comes to things related to business, when it comes to relationships, I think the why is pretty obvious. You want harmony. You want to feel loved. You want to feel cherished. You want to be able to deliver the same thing that you would like to other people. That's the whole golden rule. But I think if you fail to ask why, and you're just simply moving through the motions, and you're just like, this is just kind of like, I don't really care, then you definitely leave a trail of havoc and chaos behind you, because like, you're not actually being intentional. You're just going through the motions. And that's what exactly like you were talking about with your situation the other day with your girls. Like, it's not that you didn't ask the question, but you didn't fully commit to what you knew you wanted to have happen. You wanted a good time of connecting, and you just kind of got slack, like we all do. And maybe if you had just taken the time to quiet yourself before you walked in the door, which is something that I always have to do, especially when I can hear the kids from outside the house. I'm like, okay, I have
Yeah.
to go in there
Yep.
and do this, that, or the other. And of course, like, why? Well, I want to support my wife. I want to make sure that she knows that I have her back, and I want to make sure that my kids understand how much I love them. And so, like, it's so unfair to my family if I work 100% and then I give them 60%.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's easy to do.
Yeah, well, especially like,
It's really, really
yeah,
easy to
especially
do.
when you have to-do lists and tasks and stuff like that. You can be like, check, 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 check. Look at me, I'm the man.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I think about, households where, both parents are
Yep.
working. Like that's, working and running the family. Like that's, I've been, the, I mean, I feel like, it's not feel like we've been blessed in that we've been able to keep Mindy at home where she's been able to really be focused on the girls. And that's come at a cost too, because it definitely puts more pressure directly on me, which is something it was a choice that we consciously made, and I was willing to do that. And that was something that kind of makes me think about something I was thinking about when you were kind of talking about your last point, like there's the why, and then there's okay, if the why is strong enough and you do want to go down this path, the other thing too is it's like how bad do you want it, and are you willing to make any trade-offs that need to be made, in order are you willing to make those trade-offs, because that's something that, because a lot of times I think people really don't really properly assess. They think a lot of times people think in terms of like the best case scenarios if things go really well, as opposed to like if this goes south, what does that look like? And kind of in keeping in like the what we're talking about with me, kind of with Mindy being the one that stayed home, and like me, kind of being the person that took on the responsibility of really being the person who was generating the income for us. That there was trade-offs there. Like there are things that like that I missed. That, and even in the best case situation, sometimes things get missed, and and those were, and I don't know if I probably, if I'm really being honest with myself, I don't think that was something that like I really thought through like completely. Like I didn't think about like, well, there's a chance that I could miss this. There's a chance that I could miss that. And inevitably there were things that I missed.
Like when you say miss, are you talking
but,
about
again,
events specifically? Or are you talking about like, I was not aware that her favorite color was pink. I've just been so oblivious. Like I'm curious what you mean by miss.
well, I mean,
Okay.
all of it, but I was specifically more thinking in terms of, so given the the path that I chose, and then also, kind of being the person who, really was taking on the income thing, like, yeah, there were like soccer games that we went to where like I was literally in the middle of like a product launch, like on a Saturday, and I'm like not really fully present to what's going on in the game. Like I was kind of watching, like, or if I knew my daughter was out on the field, like Mindy would like, hey, like stop for a second, watch. Like she just went out there. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. But like even in that scenario, like you're still not fully present. Like I, at least maybe some people can be, like I wasn't. And then, yeah, there's other things, like there's like little small moments that, or like if you're so inundated with the things that you have going on, it's really hard to separate. So like, even if I was there in the house, like, and I've been working at home since 2008 or 9. I'd probably say 2009. Like ever since 2009, I've been working from home. And I could be in the house and be right in the middle of everything, but not actually be there. So that's another aspect of it.
One of the cool things though about hustling, since we're still using that word, is that what you can do is you can create a life for yourself where you can pull away for those really nice times or for those important quality times.
Absolutely.
You can't do that if you, well, okay, so for us, right? Like, it's not just because we own the business. There's people in our business who could do the exact same thing because we have flexibility. But if you're like, I can work really hard, I can stack a bunch of work inside of one day so that I can provide myself with 4 to 5 hours of free time in a day. That's really cool. So like again, exercising that hustle muscle is just saying like, yeah, I can work really hard so that I can enjoy something. And I was able to do that yesterday. I was able to go down to my kids program and watch my 2-year-old daughter not sing and just stand there and look at the ground. It was totally worth it though. But,
Yeah, absolutely.
able to build a life for yourself, to be able to have the flexibility. And, like that's a good why. If you don't want to show up, if you don't want to badge in for somebody else, like go ahead. Work 100 hours a week for a few months or a year or even 2 years to build something that allows you the freedom to be able to do that. But going back to what we talked about earlier, don't confuse freedom with things. Things they do not give you freedom. I think that's like the big Lambo trap for a lot of people. They're like, man, if I can signal to other people that I have a Lamborghini, like not only am I saying something about myself that basically says like I'm better than you. That's most Lamborghini owners, not everybody. But the other thing is like, don't think that means that you've achieved financial freedom, because guaranteed a lot of those people who have a Lamborghini are financing it, and they're probably financing more than just a Lamborghini too. So they've created an illusion of success, and so like you may be working really hard, but now you have to work even harder to keep everything that you built. In my opinion, that's a bad idea. It's a poor trade-off for trading time to just maintain the level of payments that you have on all of the crap that you own. I think the real freedom that comes with this just real intentional, dedicated work is knowing that like if tomorrow the company crumbled or whatever, like your job just were to evaporate, you're set. Because, it's the whole grasshopper and the ant story that we read to our kids. Like, ant worked, or hold on, it's a grass. Oh, ant, yeah, ant. Ant worked really hard all summer. And then the winter comes, he's like, yeah, I'm good. So I think that's another thing too, is like, it's cool to work super hard and just put things aside to use for later. Dave Ramsey talks about that quite often. He says, be willing to live now like nobody else would, so that you could live later like nobody else can, or however his phraseology goes. But that's a good reason to dedicate yourself to a craft for a time. But again, just don't get lost in it for longer than you should, and don't make that become the normal way of living.
Yeah. I think again it goes back to you kind of wrap back to the why again, right? I mean, so if your why is freedom, then the first thing when you as soon as you're able to buy, like, so, and say maybe you like nice cars too, but that's probably not the first thing that you should go after if you're really going after freedom, time freedom and freedom to do whatever you want to do. But if you're the person that like that has literally been your life goal, like, then man, more power to you. Nothing against people. I love nice cars too.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with owning it, but there's probably something wrong with working so hard that nice whatever you have gets used rarely, because you're just always trying to pay for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and there's I mean, there's all sorts of stuff we could dive into that, but yeah, I'm not going to argue with you on that at all.
Because I'm right. Just that was in reference to that meeting.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Was there even a question as whether I was right or not? Like, what?
That's sorry
good.
for the inside joke.
No, it's all good. Yeah, man. Hustle is a good, it's a good thing. Like I said, like if there was one thing that I got from watching my grandparents and watching my dad, is at the end of the day, if you're willing to trade on work ethic, people will make that trade with you all day long. It's just being intelligent about it and knowing what you're doing, why you're doing it, and for how long you're willing to, based around what your priorities are. And I think it's just staying clear on those things, like what's most important to you based on the decisions you're making in your life, and not getting lured into something that was not in your plan. And I've definitely lived that one out, and I can definitely speak to, and I'm very, very thankful. Me getting as sick as I got probably was one of the best things that ever happened to me. I don't actually wish it on I don't wish it on my worst enemies. It was brutal. But there was a lot of education there. And the craziest thing was because the way that it forced me to slow down, there were some things that like I had done previously that caught back up with me, and opportunities opened up that wouldn't have if I would have just kept, just blasting myself with just purely trying to brute force my way to succeeding, in my life. And, it's, again, it's just, I think it's getting clear on all of those things, and hopefully not, I sometimes learn slow. Like I kind of have to get the crap kicked out of me a little bit sometimes to learn some things. But I've been working at not being that way.
Yeah.
Trying to learn from my mistakes and other people's more.
Right. Yeah, I think that being able to provide a shortcut to happiness, maybe not happiness, but contentment, and saying hustling is just part of the equation. We always say enjoy the ride. So you should.
Yeah, man, enjoy the process. Yeah. Like if you want to, we've talked about this in the past. It's like, it's so easy to get caught up in wanting to be something that you're not yet, wanting to like, have the respect, have the status, have like the recognition, when the beauty in the process actually is fun. And it's like, and if you don't stay present to that process, like you miss out on opportunities to really grow. And like that's, and then when the next big opportunity like shows up, like if you're not that person that's ready to receive it, that one will zip by you too until you learn that lesson.
Yeah, I think so many of us are looking at life like, I want to be anywhere but here. And sometimes that's not totally inappropriate, right? Your situation could be terrible.
Sure.
But I think a lot of the time when people are thinking that, myself included, you're just like, I'm just not happy with where we're at where I'm at, because I was thinking we're going to be up here and I'm still here. Well, here again is probably a lot better than where you were. So be happy with that. That's a good way to look at life, is like, this is where you are. Like, you can't change anything. Like, you cannot go back in time. You cannot go in the future. All you have is this moment. What do they say? The present is a gift. That's why they call it the present. That is just one of the worst. I'm sure that's on a Hallmark card somewhere. But it is true. Like, all you have is this moment right now, so be thankful for it. And again, that doesn't mean that you have to abandon the will to work or the will to change your life, or just like, you don't have to abandon dreams of a better future, but at least trying to come to grips with the fact that like, today is all that you have. Be happy with it. Be happy with the process. Enjoy the struggle. Consider it joy that you would encounter struggles of various kinds. That's a good way of looking at it. Yeah. And then of course, just using that, like turning that negative or whatever, like the dissatisfaction with that moment into something positive. Like, I'm thankful for this moment because it's going to instill inside of me a greater conviction to change my life or whatever. I'm pretty sure that's what Plato said. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, man. Life moves by fast, man. It's easy to head down a path and put your head down, and then you get so sucked into it that you look up one day and you realize there's a lot of really amazing things that you missed. And so it's knowing your why, setting your priorities, knowing the game, and then kind of setting up a rhythm that enables you to take care of yourself, take care of the people around you, and keep working towards the goals that you have. It's sacrificing your health and relationships, like, not worth it. It's not worth it to make those types of sacrifices. And if you are, then again, it's like when we talked about, there's situations where the week that you clamped down and went harder and went like the more of the 70, 80 hour range, it's like, you're like, all right, there's a little bit of a sprint here. Like, I'm going to miss a couple things, but this is not the new norm. Like, I just got to handle this, because if I handle this, things should be even better down the road. And I'm going to get that back.
It's so funny that you even say that. So I saw on Instagram the other day, like, I can't remember if it was a couple that has some kind of Instagram account together on healthy relationships or what it was, but there was this husband saying, "Hey babe, I'm going to communicate to you." Like, he didn't say it exactly like that. He's like, "I'm going to be working a little bit more, give me some grace, blah, 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 blah." And there was a few situations that they played out like that. And all the comments were like, "Nobody ever talks like this. This is stupid. They don't love each other. They just look like partners, like roommates." And I remember going into that 70-hour work week, I told my wife, I was like, "Look, like, this is going to suck. I'm not going to be around for much. Just understand that, like, I love you. You're going to see me very little. I have to get this done." So I at least prepared her for it. And I was like, so I was reflecting on that Instagram post. I'm like, no, that's exactly what I did. And I was able to get through that week with my wife totally understanding why I was ignoring her, because she understood, like, he's got to work.
Yeah.
And
no, it was great. Well, but you, man, setting expectations, and this will probably, we'll inevitably either have some people that come out of the podcast and we'll talk about relationships, and, you know, or we can talk about it. I mean, man, after being married for, it'll be 21 years this next summer. Like, I can share a whole lot of the what not to do's when it comes to that. But, you know, if there's one thing I've learned, like, when you are going into those types of situations, like, set expectations. Like, absolutely. Like, that was really smart of you to do that. You know, it's funny. I always tell my wife, like, I was like, you and I are always having negotiations. She's like, we don't negotiate, like, we're married. And I'm like, well, yes, we are. But I was like, but there are times where I come in and I tell you, like, hey, here's this and this is going to happen. Like, I know this is taking away from this. So I want you to know that I'm aware of that. And let's intelligently figure out how, like, you can still accomplish this, or there's another way for us to make this good, because there's a bank, so to speak, and there's withdrawals happening that, like, aren't fair to you. So we need to make sure there's deposits that are also made, so that way, you know, these things get handled. Like, you know, in that situation, it was her making sure she got her time away where she could take care of herself. But yeah, man, that was something that, like, I did not do a good job with that earlier in our marriage, and I really try hard on that one now. So that's great that you did that. And it's funny that people would say, "Oh, that's not a marriage." It's like, no, that's an advanced level of marriage, where you're giving somebody the heads up, like, hey, here's how the next couple weeks are going to roll. I'm aware of it, and I'm sorry about it, but I'm going to make it up to you over here. Like, here's how this is going to come back.
Yeah,
around.
and again, like, knowing that this has an exit ramp or an off ramp, it's like, this is not going to last long. Nobody's going to enjoy it. I even told Will, who works for me, I was like, hey, bud, this week's going to suck. Let your wife know. Like, you're going to work really hard. I'm not asking, I don't ask much of you, like, past, like, 40 hours, but this week, you're getting it.
This week, this is. I'm apologizing in advance to both you and your significant other.
And, you know, like, and now it's over, and nobody remembers, because it was uneventful, and we didn't string another 70-hour work week on top of another 70-hour work week, and another one. So
yeah.
All right. Well, for fear of beating a dead horse, and, you know, intentionally hustling on that beating of the dead horse, I think we can go ahead and
we hustle too much on the
hustle
it's
podcast. Friday, right? So guys and gals who are listening to this, it's Friday, so I'm gonna intentionally eject from this podcast so I can intentionally hang out with my wife and my wonderful in-laws and do a cold plunge so I can do hard things before I hang out with my in-laws. No, I'm just kidding. I love my in-laws. They're great. So I don't have to do a cold plunge before. I just have to.
No, that's just too.
Yeah, it's just like, you know, do a hard thing and do them often. But yeah, appreciate you, Nate. It was good. Yeah, I'm hoping that everybody enjoyed the conversation. Again, please go ahead and follow us, subscribe, rate and review. And don't forget to go to vnsh.com/POP to get a discounted Vanish holster, as well as getting entered to win the Rocky Ridge Silverado. That expires on the 3rd of June, 2024. So if you're listening to this in 2028, I apologize. That truck is long gone. Thanks, y'all.
And it is legit.